Castlevania: The Adventure ReBirth is the third entry in Konami's ReBirth series for WiiWare, with Gradius ReBirth and Contra ReBirth before it. The Adventure ReBirth is based on the Game Boy game of the same name, although it's not a completely faithful remake with many alterations and improvements. Also, Castlevania: The Adventure ReBirth is the first Castlevania game I've ever played to completion. It's not that I hated the series, it's simply because I haven't devoted enough time to sitting down and mastering what are some of the hardest games ever made. But when The Adventure ReBirth released on WiiWare, I decided to give it a download and take my time with it. I'm happy to report I was thoroughly impressed with what I played, and feel like I'm now ready to tackle some of the harder games in the franchise. The game does have different difficulty settings, so if you're new to the series, you may want to try it on easy, as the game can be very challenging at first. Luckily, when you run out of lives, you don't need to start from the beginning of the game, and can instead resume from the beginning of the stage you died on. The easier difficulty than other Castlevania games may turn off hardcore players, but you can always increase the difficulty and reduce your number of lives in the options menu. There's 6 stages of old school Castlevania goodness to be had in ReBirth, which may seem short, but for $10 is well worth the price of admission. All the staples of the franchise, including whipping everything in sight, finding meat in walls to restore health, using different weapons to beat challenging bosses, carefully jumping across narrow platforms, and avoiding annoying enemies like the bats, are all here. There's nothing particularly unique about the game, which does make sense given that it's a remake of an older title. And hell, I'll take this any day over the way too different Lords of Shadow series. The visuals are great, a big step up from the black and white dreariness of the Game Boy title, and it looks about as good as the Super Nintendo Castlevania, maybe even a little bit better. But because of the old school style of it, it doesn't support native 16:9 widescreen, so you may want to stretch the image if you own an HD TV, or keep it the same 4:3 aspect ratio if you're a purist. The music is all remixes of past Castlevania soundtracks, and they get the job done, but I wouldn't say it's one of the better soundtracks in the long-running series. Nothing about them is all that memorable. Of course, you could say that about this game as a whole. Because it's paying tribute to older games in the series, there's nothing in The Adventure ReBirth that will stick out and force you to remember it. It's a very safe game, but that's not really a bad thing. If you're in the mood for an affordable, polished, and classic Castlevania title, and would rather forget about the Lords of Shadow series, then The Adventure ReBirth is just what you're looking for. I give it a 7.5 out of 10.